I want to tell you what's happening in Sudan. But before I do that, we need to go back to a time before the war. The month of Ramadan, at dawn, on June 3rd, 2019. About 2 months earlier, the military has taken charge after former President Omar al-Bashir was overthrown from power. The place, in front of the headquarters of the General Command of the Sudanese Army. Osman was a young man in his 30s, present at a peaceful civilian sit-in in the center of the capital Khartoum, demanding the transfer of power to a civilian government. A military convoy reached the edge of the sit-in area, and when the police and rapid support forces surrounded that area, protesters chanted, "Civilian rule, civilian rule," a reference to the civilian government that they wanted instead of the military rule. But armed forces opened live fire on the protesters right after dawn prayer during Ramadan, while people were fasting. At least 120 people were killed, and hundreds of others went missing. Osman says, "We tried to push back the rapid support forces, but they surrounded the area and fired at us. 3 of my relatives were killed in front of my eyes, 2 men and a woman. When we tried to transport the body, I felt an injury on my head. I lost consciousness and did not wake up until 3 days later in the hospital." The bloody events Osman experienced that day, which claimed the lives of dozens, were documented in a 60-page report by the Human Rights Watch. They refer to the massacre by the name, the General Command Massacre. But did those who wrote this report imagine that 4 years later, that 60 pages would not be enough to document the atrocities of war committed by the same people who committed the crime against Osman, his family, and his friends? And that because those perpetrators got away with their crime the first time without being held accountable, it opened the door for them to ignite the flames of war in the country. A war preceded by a final iftar session. Sudan has had repeated experiences with prolonged conflicts and civil wars. And so we would like to think that its leaders have learned from these experiences to avoid dragging the country back into these dark days. But in April 2023, a new war broke out. And this time, it's not just in one area, but in the entire country. So how did we reach this stage of war in April 2023? Between the armed forces, led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the rapid support forces, led by Hemeti. Will this continue for years, like other wars in Sudan? And what were the events that happened that led to that last iftar, which caused the war to break out after? I'm Khalid El-Bey, a cartoonist and Sudanese activist, and I'm here in collaboration with AJ Plus to break down what's happening in Sudan. To those who say that the issue in Sudan is simply a problem between 2 military men, then what comes to mind is, well, the solution is simple. But the story is much bigger than that. So what happened? Let's start with General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who have been waging a war against each other since April 15, 2023. And the fight for power between them continues till today. Just days before the war, they were partners in power. Hemeti and Burhan are not 2 military men who found themselves in power by coincidence. This is them in 2019 in the Transitional Military Council, Burhan as president and Hemeti as his deputy. 2 military leaders of 2 armies in one country. The first army is the Sudanese Armed Forces led by Burhan. The second is the Rapid Support Forces, previously known as the Janjaweed, who are described as the militia group led by Dagalo, a militia leader. But how can a militia leader become a part of the government and also be so powerful to wage a war against the army? For centuries, Sudan had a long history with the military, and it was with the start of the British occupation that sparked the modern formation of the Sudanese army in 1925. In 1955, the British, who occupied Sudan, left, and the independence was declared, leading to a civilian government. But since politicians disagreed on the form of this newborn state, this sparked conflicts between the parties, which became the beginning of politicians calling upon the military for help. In 1958, Ibrahim Aboud led the first coup, followed by another one in 1969 led by Jafar al-Nimeri. This allowed for war to take over parts of the country, paving way for the third coup in 1989, which brought Omar al-Bashir to power, that led to 30 years of dictatorship on Sudan and its people. And this 30-year rule, which caused internal political instability, multiple crises, and wars across Sudan, ended with a chant from its people, just fall. تسقط بس. After widespread popular demonstrations, the army responded by ousting Bashir from power, leading to the fall of his regime in April 2019. After ousting al-Bashir, a transitional military council led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, with Hemeti as his deputy, ruled for several months. Due to ongoing demonstrations, an agreement was reached in August 2019 with the civilian power to form a sovereignty council, chaired by al-Burhan. This council included both military and civilian members. This power-sharing arrangement lasted until the military 2021 coup attempted against the civilian component of the council. During this time, the two initiated normalization process with Israel. Sudan was removed from the list of state sponsors of terrorism, and the Juba Peace Agreement was signed in 2020 to end the war in the country. But did the political situation really change? Civilians returned to a state of push and pull, and this time, not with the soldiers, but among themselves. Now, Sudan, a country already suffering from economic crisis and political division, faced yet another coup. It was in October 2021 that the military takeover took place, led by those two men that ran the Sovereign Council, Burhan and Hemeti. They claimed that the coup was to correct the path of the revolution. After the coup, Burhan announced that the military would hand over power to an elected government before July 2023. But that didn't happen. What happened was something else, bloody and frightening. Why was it that the two men in power and agreement during a critical period of the country's history turned to disagreement at the cost of its people? This time, they couldn't move forward alone. The military was forced to sit down again to negotiate with the civilians. And at this particular point, the signs of division between the two men began. In December 2022, they reached an agreement, and it talked about bringing the democratic transition back on track after the attempted coup, forming a civilian government and preparing for elections. But despite this, differences began to clash, to the point where they started competing to arm themselves. However, the major point of this agreement was that all military forces in Sudan, including Hemeti's rapid support forces, were merged into one army. And that raised the alarms for Hemeti. Al-Burhan was adamant about his conditions regarding how and for how long integration processes would take place, insisting that it should happen within a year. However, Hemeti had a different vision, stating that the process would take a decade. Hemeti did not want to lose the power he spent 20 years building. Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, from the Arab Rezagat tribe in Darfur. While there's a lot unknown about him, people say that he's in his 40s. And his tribe is known for trading and camel herding. He founded a local militia to protect the camel caravans. His business expanded, and he even owned a furniture store in Niala, the capital of South Darfur. For centuries, African and Arab tribes coexisted in the region of West Sudan, but the region's conditions mirrored that of the entire country. Desertification, drought, internal displacement, and agricultural policies that ravaged everything. Signs of discord between Arabs and non-Arabs began to appear since the 1980s, especially after the famine that hit the region. It led to the rebellion that erupted in 2003 against the central government in Khartoum. Non-Arab tribes rebelled against the government's neglect of the region's development and its bias towards Arab tribes. The government in Khartoum did not want to intervene directly this time, so it took an easier solution: proxy war. Omar al-Bashir's regime supported the establishment of the Janjaweed militia, composed of Arab tribes, to suppress the rebellion. And the name Janjaweed matches the meaning: jinn on horseback. Sudan was set for a new chapter of tragedy: killing, displacement, and rape. Crimes perpetrated by those men and documented in rights reports. Hundreds of thousands fell victims to this war, and around 3 million people were displaced. Amid all the bloodshed and war, Hemeti was climbing the ranks and emerged as one of the leaders of the Janjaweed in South Darfur and in other areas. The man became a warlord. So, what did that mean for al-Bashir? Despite all the atrocities committed by the Janjaweed militia, led by Hemeti, in support of al-Bashir regime, and despite the regime's support for them, Hemeti rebelled against al-Bashir in 2007. But later he said he didn't actually intend to rebel. All he wanted was to attract the government's attention, to gain higher military rank and political position. Hemeti was looking beyond being just a warlord fighting a proxy war for the country's president, and he got what he wanted. The Bashir regime granted him the rank of brigadier general, despite the fact that Hemeti had never set foot in a military school in his life. Hemeti forces, once one of the Janjaweed factions, transformed into something resembling an imperial guard for Omar al-Bashir. The rapid support forces were founded from the Janjaweed, and Hemeti began appearing everywhere. Military parades, television reports, and it was even said that al-Bashir called him Himaiti, my protector. And the cycle of killing began to turn once again. Human Rights Watch documented in a 2015 report titled Men with No Mercy how the rapid support forces committed crimes in Darfur, particularly during 2 military campaigns called the Decisive Summer Operations. Entire communities were forcibly displaced, wells and food storage facilities destroyed, and wealth looted, including crimes of torture, killings, and mass rape. So how did al-Bashir respond to this? Through another military promotion. During his years of rule, al-Bashir took greater steps to bring Hemeti closer to him, making Rapid Support Forces an independent force in 2017, and it became directly affiliated to the presidency. By doing this, Hemeti was able to position himself on the political and military map of Sudan, and he climbed through the various promotions, from brigadier to major general to lieutenant general. And the size of his forces doubled, with some estimating it at 40,000. The most important aspect of his rise to power is how he built his financial resources. From the early years of forming his forces, Hemeti imposed control over the most important gold mines in Sudan and relied on them as his primary source of funding. Even participating in the Yemen War in 2015 to fight the Houthis further strengthened his financial wealth. Additionally, the RSF participated in operations to curb irregular immigrations to Europe, which led to them receiving European support. Some say al-Bashir's regime reaped what it sowed and wanted the RSF forces to have the final say in Darfur. But what happened in Khartoum was something far beyond that. With the outbreak of the revolution in 2018, it was expected that Hemeti and his forces would be similar to an imperial guard to al-Bashir's regime. And initially, it seemed that way. But with the persistence of the protesters, it appeared that Hemeti chose to jump ship. He abandoned al-Bashir and called for his overthrow. But Hemeti was just one part of the new elite that were taking over Sudan. Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the counterpart to Hemeti, was born in 1960 in River Nile State. He graduated from the military college and worked as a military attaché in China. He rose through the ranks until he became commander of the land forces and was promoted to the rank of general by al-Bashir in 2018, making him Inspector General of the Armed Forces. His path crossed with Hemeti before the revolution. Al-Burhan played a role in crushing the rebellion in Darfur. He was also supervising the Sudanese forces in Yemen in coordination with Hemeti in 2015. And they met again after he took oath at the head of the military council in April 2019, after the ousting of al-Bashir. However, their fates would later collide over the issue of integrating the RSF under the army's command. It all came to the forefront during the last iftar in Ramadan 2023. As the conflict between the two generals escalated, mediators tried to intervene. An agreement was near, and the main point of discussion was the military leadership structure during the transitional period. The generals had Ramadan iftar at the home of Lieutenant General Shamsuddin al-Kabashi, the deputy armed commander. But the scene in the street was completely different. Military vehicles and RSF were spreading across Khartoum. The first shot was fired at dawn on April 15, 2023. And that was the beginning of a war in Sudan. Hemeti says he's fighting this war for democracy and the civil state, and that he will not allow Burhan to have a military state. Meanwhile, Burhan considers himself defending the country from Hemeti's betrayal as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. This left Sudan's map fragmented, to the extent that some cities were divided between the Rapid Support Forces and the army. Both sides are determined to resolve the battle militarily, and they claim that the victory is within easy reach, but neither of them has been able to achieve it so far. All negotiation tracks have so far failed to reach a solution. It was as if a bomb has exploded and scattered its shrapnel everywhere, costing the Sudanese their lives, their homes, and their future. A life unlike the one they aspired to live, and a daily reality made up of continuous war crimes.